I'm really looking forward to it. We've been working on it for a while, and it's great to have some cross-border pollination on a really exciting campaign that, unfortunately, our media around here isn't really covering very much, even though it's actually big news and is very close. So before we let Dylan talk, I just want to pass around some flyers. There's two really cool events coming up. Through the Wire is an old POV film from the 80s about 3 women political prisoners who were housed in like a special secret isolation unit, like a prison within a prison, and pretty much tortured. And POV, which is like a PBS documentary team, exposed it, and now it's like really hard to find the film, but we got a copy of it and we're going to show it through the Leonard Peltier monthly event series. So that's on the 20th. So I'm going to pass those. You just take some and pass them around. And then Josh Harper, who was a Shack 7, a Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty defendant, and did 3 years in prison for that campaign to stop the dissection of Huntington Life Sciences, is coming all the way out here from Portland, Oregon to talk about his experiences. We're super excited about that. Thank you to everyone who contributed to that fundraiser to make that happen. There's some of you in the room, and it was pretty awesome that you could do that. We want to keep making those kind of things happen. And also, thank you to everyone who helped promote this event tonight. We got a lot of new faces, or not so common faces in here, and it's really cool to see all the stuff that was going on online and help make awareness of this spread. So it's really awesome that we could show Dylan such a good turnout. So here's the Harper flyers. So if you just pass them around, you can leave them at the back table when you're done. Like I said, I'm super excited about this event, and I don't want to take any more time out talking, so here's Dylan. Oh, there's a bunch of books at the back that are all related to animal liberation, earth liberation stuff, so check them out when you get a chance.
I want to thank Blas and Teresa and Nate, and also Morgan did a really good job promoting this too. So I love burning books. I love my friends in Western New York, so we showed up tonight. Thank you very much. Before I get started, a couple things. I like to heckle when I'm in a crowd, so if you're a heckler, or you have to interject, you have a question or anything like that, just go right ahead. I'm going to give you guys a kind of a somewhat of a version of a talk that I gave in October that really angered a lot of people. And it's good sometimes to anger people because it shows that they have some kind of emotional reaction. Every event that I've been doing on this tour, we called it Make the Commercial Stop. People live in Western New York, you've heard the Marineland commercials your whole lives. This is one of their largest ad markets, and they do only traditional advertising, so radio and TV spots. You guys have heard them a million times and seen the billboards. So on this tour, so far this is the 3rd stop. Every single time that I'm speaking, I try to give a completely different talk, just because that's how I like to speak, and I want to give something new to a crowd each time. So because of this space, specifically in the way that you're dealing with intersectional politics, you're dealing with coalition building and multiple movements all at the same time, and talking about the power of understanding all those things at the same time, I wanted to give a talk about coalition building tonight and Marineland Animal Defense, because it's something that's really central to what we do, and always has been, and it's probably, in my opinion, the reason why we've been so successful. And also, unfortunately, I don't think it's something that's very commonplace within the world of animal rights organizing. So, for people who are here tonight, if anyone, hopefully through the course of what I'm talking about, you'll get some snippets on Marineland specifically, or issues with animal captivity. But if someone's looking for that, just ask questions kind of throughout and stop. Because if I tell that story, we'll be here for 5 days. Marineland's, as Vice magazine called it the other day, a hellhole.
What magazine?
Vice magazine. Yeah. To talk about coalition building, in my own personal perspective on it, I have to go back basically with my own personal history. So I grew up in Dunnville, Ontario. It's about an hour from the border, rural community, and I grew up in a small village called Port Maitland, and that's actually where the Grand River meets Lake Erie. I grew up mostly below the poverty line, and generally when I was growing up, my father was always in trouble with the law, and he was always in the court system, and we were always up against these people, people who lived around us or people in the community who had a lot more money, a lot more resources, and a lot more influence. And as a kid, it was just fundamentally, through my own experiences, I understood, like, the legal system is stacked against you. Like it's not a place of justice, it's not a place of equity, and people who think that it is, are really naive and probably haven't had that experience. So right off the bat, I had a political consciousness that just kind of came out of, being a part of my family. So my family also, we lived somewhat in the country. My sister and I were always rescuing animals. I just assumed, until I was like a teenager, I just assumed that everyone did this. Like everyone pulled cats off the street, and everyone like pulled dogs off the street, and everyone helped turtles and birds and squirrels and snakes and all these things. Like when you grow up in that setting, it's just kind of like, well, why wouldn't you do that, right? As a kid. My sister went on to be a vet tech. She still is, and I went on to, do the kind of organizing that I do. But that was really foundational for me. Growing up in Dublin, Ontario, I did not hear the word vegan. I did not. There was no animal rights community. It's a population of 12,000 people. Probably most popular now for being the hometown of Nathan Horton, who plays for the Boston Bruins. Any hockey fans here? Yeah, that's basically, when you grow up in Dublin, you play hockey or you drink beers and you work. It's a blue-collar type community, rural community, backwards in a lot of ways, but also has some really charming kind of attributes. So I go to university, similar kind of cliched story. I go to university, I meet some people, I broaden my horizons. I finally meet some people who are vegetarian or vegan, and it makes me really start to think and question a lot of the beliefs that I had. Going into university, I read a lot of Marx, and I was interested in environmentalism, but it was never really something that I'd learned to put into practice in my own life. The only reason I give that kind of background is just that, before becoming an animal rights activist, or whatever you want to call it, or becoming an advocate, I had just fundamentally, I couldn't separate these issues. I understood class and how class related to the environment, or class related to how we treat other animal species. That was something that just fundamentally I couldn't say these are just boxes, right, that we can pick off one by one. So finally, I go through do the university thing, and then just so happens after that's done, I start to become more involved. Locally in the community in Niagara, we're really lucky. There's a group called Niagara Action for Animals that have been around since the late 80s. It's one of the longest running animal advocacy organizations in North America. And out of that, I was able to really quickly be mentored, kind of know the landscape, and then be set on my way with a lot of support. And we did a couple of years of organizing at Marineland, myself specifically, with Niagara Action for Animals, because they had been on the issue for a very long time. But everyone was really scared at that time because there had already been a lawsuit. In 2003, Marineland filed suit against 2 Niagara Action for Animals organizers, basically claiming defamation and tertiary targeting because of a letter that they had sent to a car dealership, basically asking them not to go there for their yearly picnic. So that kind of scared some people, and a lot of times, for people who have been around for a long time and see kind of generational differences, a kind of new breed of activists came up in the Niagara region who didn't really have that experience, and I guess were in some ways kind of too dumb to know that it was a lost cause, or that, why would you be afraid? Like, well, they'll sue you and we'll deal with it when we get sued, right? It becomes so much easier when that's not your experience already, right? So we did a couple years of organizing there, and one thing that I always saw as a problem was that we had this space where there was so much hatred towards the park itself, from the employees that worked there, from the local community, from environmentalists and from animal rights activists, but yet we never had any kind of way to channel this so that we were all together, so we would be kind of more powerful. And in the summer of 2010, I was kicking around ideas with friends, like, oh, I'm going to do a hunger strike in Marineland. I'm like, ah, that's dumb. So I kept thinking about it, what are we going to do? Something needs to be done here, and it needs to be a sustained campaign that isn't just a couple symbolic demonstrations or, strongly worded press releases, and then nothing else comes out of it. Finally, in early 2011, that decision was largely made for us. So for a couple of years, Marineland had bought up, John Holer, I should say, who was the owner, founder, and president of Marineland. He had bought up property that was right next to Marineland's property. And this was a mobile home park. He bought it up in 2005, and he went around to all the residents. There was 47 residents. He went around to all the different, homes and said, I'm just going to be your new landlord, and nothing's going to happen, so don't worry about it. The mobile home itself, a lot of the trailers that were there were fixed on site, so they couldn't actually move, and people lived there for decades, right? So they poured money into these homes, knowing that, if something happened, I can't even move them. In 2007, John Holer delivers them all eviction notices. This is called the Green Oaks Trailer Park, and they launch a campaign that's called GoHomeless.ca. They fought that from, over that span of time, 4 years basically, through the legal system, through the city, basically doing anything they possibly could to stay in their homes. Because for a lot of these people, they still own mortgages on those homes. And if they're fixed, how are they going to, you have to live somewhere else, you can't even access where your home is, but you still have to pay that mortgage. You're on the hook for it. A lot of these people were marginalized, fixed income, low income. In 2011, finally, they've exhausted all resources and they lose. And the last person to leave the park, her name was Paula Millard. Paula was in her 70s, and throughout, Paula had said, I will die before I leave this park. John Holer can go fuck himself, pardon my language, but John Holer can go fuck himself. I will die here before I leave. And she was the last one in the park for weeks, and John would come in daily and just do rounds. He likes to do this in his truck. Just drive into his truck and just sit out front of her home. And she documented all this, and nothing was done with the local police, but finally it came down to eviction date. And the night before, Paula actually put a bag over her head and threw some helium in there and killed herself. Before she did that, she wrote on the walls of her trailer, "John, you'll get it back tenfold." So, in the lead up to this is the 50th anniversary in 2011 of Marineland. And this was supposed to be a big year for them. They were going to celebrate it throughout. And it starts with a lot of animal rights activists, young animal rights activists, sitting in a room thinking, what can we do to broaden the scope of this and actually channel all the hate and anger towards this park in a way that is more powerful and has more effect. And then Paula dies. I had already known one of the main organizers from the Green Oaks Trailer Park, Brian Topolinski, for a little while before this, but it became immediately apparent after that, basically this needs to be a coalition space from the get-go, and we need to organize together, and we need to hold John Holer accountable not only for what he's done to animals on site, but also to workers and to people in the community. So, that sets a stage, basically, for where we begin. It already fundamentally, from the beginning, is not just an animal rights campaign. We do our first demonstration on opening day in May 2011, which a bunch of Western New York Animal Allies activists tried to get across the border for and were denied. But we had about 40 people out. And it was a really good time. It was a great demonstration. We came back for the second one, and right off the bat, we noticed there was a huge police presence. So there was about 60 people at that demonstration, and the cops rolled up with 7 cop cars, and the last one being a court services van. And they all started putting their gloves on and moving through the crowd as if they're going to make a mass arrest. We're just standing there with signs. At that point it was a pretty tame picture in your mind, an animal rights demonstration where there's not even a megaphone, and we're not really near people other than holding signs and leafleting cars as they enter. So they start sweeping through, they don't have their badge numbers on, they're bumping people around and just kind of acting wild. And we get it all on film, and coming out of that, one of the main things that really drove our activism in 2011 was a response to the police. So we put that video up, we shamed them, and the broader community in Niagara, again, looked at that and said, this is a free speech issue, this is a civil rights issue. People should be able to express their opinions and their opposition to this park without being harassed by cops. How come this guy, just because he's a millionaire, calls up the cops and he gets 7 cop cars? At my house, if I get a broken window, I gotta wait an hour and I get 1 cop. It doesn't make sense, right? So again, it was like taking an issue and then trying to spin it back into focus outside of just our own little groups. Because one thing that I will fundamentally say for anyone who's interested in animal liberation or animal rights, and I'm sure Les potentially could back me up on this, but when you look at purely educational activities and tactics, you're looking at 1 to 2% of the population that's going to have an actual positive response to the point where they're actually going to join you or going to initiate change. So you have to broaden the scope in any situation, or you're just going to continue to target a very small population, a very small community. So we spun that with the cops, and then further through that summer, John Holler, who's the park owner, he basically loves this cat and mouse game of demonstrations. So he'll put up a sign on a telephone pole, and he'll be told to take it down, and then he'll put up a bigger sign, and like he'll spend whole demonstrations basically just sitting in his car, just watching us. So we take John's reaction, and again we spin it back to the community, and we open it up as a kind of a broader history. And as we're pitching this to local news media, we're including the Green Oaks Trailer Park story, and we're including the issue of civil rights and the police presence on site, and including a critique of property, right? Obviously this guy is only getting this response from the local business community and from cops because he's a millionaire, multi-millionaire. 2011, a young reporter from the Toronto Star comes down to St. Catharines, and we sit down and we basically rap for a little while. Liam Casey is his name, and Liam is basically, in a lot of ways, similar to the folks who were trying to organize on this campaign. He was a young journalist, and he didn't really understand why they had to play by the old rules of journalism where you have to get two sides to a story, you can't print anything. Because in the case of Marineland, their press strategy was actually brilliant. For decades, if they were ever asked anything, they would never respond. No news source would ever run it, because if you're an animal rights activist, you're emotional, you're illogical, it makes no sense. It needs to have a counter or it's biased. So if you're ever running a business and you're doing horrible things and you don't want press, just remember that it's a press strategy. Never say anything. But Liam came down, and I told Liam at that point, we really want to make the graves on site the focus. A lot of people have this idea, well, I'll put this, people in the room. Does anyone here think that the animals at Marineland must go somewhere else in the wintertime? I staged that the wrong way, yeah. Les is saying yes, but a lot of people think that, right? They go, well, they go somewhere else in the wintertime, right? It's like, oh, well, they get buried somewhere else, right? As if there's like orca graveyards, you know. Or there's like housing facilities, like these great big tanks for these dolphins during the wintertime. But no, they stay on site all year round, and they actually get buried on site too. We've known this forever, and it was just kind of a common sense thing. We had demonstration signs that were actually tombstones and banners that said Marineland's mass graves. But a lot of people just didn't want to believe that. It was just kind of this barrier. Like, if you're recognizing the fact that animals are continually dying there, you have to accept the fact that captivity is fundamentally flawed, right? So we pitched that to him, and he takes that back and ends up writing a couple stories about basically John's history and him as a character. And this gets a lot of interest in the Niagara region, but also in Toronto. And the Toronto Star is a national paper, so they basically dedicate at that time that they're going to follow up on this story. Now, reverse it a little bit. There have been protests at Marineland for decades, and throughout that, there had always been ex-employees who would come forward telling us, what was going on. There was an employee who came forward in the early 90s and somewhat kind of repeated this process, but they came up by themselves. And in response, Marineland came up with a lot of non-disclosures and really strengthened basically their legal position if a staff member was going to come forward. So it became a position of, if anyone is going to come forward and speak publicly, it's going to have to be a lot of people at once, and it's going to have to be with a paper outside of the Niagara region, and it's going to have to be a large national paper that can't basically be threatened or intimidated by Marineland. So the stage is set basically for everyone at this point. We've got Paula Millard has died, we've got activists on site, we've got an attempt by cops to repress demonstrations and really quell free speech. We've got John Holler acting a fool at demonstrations and doing things he shouldn't do, like threatening to cut my head off on film. You can see that on video. And then that was what we were looking at in 2011. The people who had started this campaign, basically what I term it now is just an intersectional grassroots pressure campaign. So what that means is that from the beginning it's a coalition space. We're not just thinking specifically about one issue or prioritizing it. Grassroots just means it's all volunteer, community members. It's a structure that's an attempt to be as horizontal as possible in organizing and not vertical. And then pressure campaign just means as we continue to increase pressure against Marineland to meet the demands that we've set, right? If that makes sense for everyone. So no one really had a whole lot of experience outside of the organizing that had happened at Marineland previously and the stories for things that happened there. We didn't really have any professional organizers in any kind of sense of, you know, national advocacy jobs or anything like that. We're just some kids who wanted to kind of mess around and do our best to kick up some dust and agitate in the local community in a way that broadened the message of what animal liberation is, right? Animal liberation is fundamentally more than just about my own conviction, right? Or how I relate to other animal species. It has to be about the community. 2011 ends and 2012 comes. And we had this big demonstration organized. It was the opening day demonstration for 2012. And there was like over 150 people who were going to come out for it. And then the last minute, Marineland actually switched their opening day. Now we thought this is really weird. Maybe they're trying to mess with us as far as this demonstration goes. So in the end, we still hold the demonstration that day, but we get about 100 people out. And because the park's not actually open, we march on the falls area, the falls viewing area, which the people probably wouldn't understand this here. Maybe there's a similar situation, but Niagara Park's property, the cops there have jurisdiction the same way that cops would in a community. So you can't actually demonstrate by the falls area without a permit. So it was funny, a lot of people saw civil disobedience, which I'll talk about later on, and treated it as if it never happened at Marineland. But that day we actually got kettled off the property by bike cops, Niagara Park's cops. And the whole time it was just this funny back and forth because they fundamentally don't want to issue tickets because their permit process is actually against our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, right? They can pass municipal bylaws or have even provincial laws that counter that, but if nothing gets tested in the courts, they'll just continue to kind of intimidate, right? So it was like, you know, myself and a bunch of other people being like, we got the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, what are you going to do about it? And I'd be like, oh, I hate you, Dylan, just get off the freedom property. So finally we leave, and we head back up to Marineland that day. Now, we continue on with demonstrations, and not long after that, we hear murmurs that there's some stuff brewing with some ex-employees who left the park. We're kind of arm's length at this time because there's the established network of people that we already have who are willing to talk, but will only talk off the record. And the workers on site are actually pretty well organized for a non-unionized work environment. They're pretty well organized. They all look out for each other. You know, they all know each other, all in constant communication with each other. So this is going on in the background. In the foreground of this, in response to those demonstrations, Marineland actually goes to the city of Niagara Falls and says, can we lease the property where the demonstrators stand on? So this is public property, and they went to the city of Niagara Falls, and within a week they had a proposal that was publicly posted and then heard. So what would need to happen in that process is they declared the land where we demonstrated on as a surplus, meaning that no one used it. And once it's a surplus, they can lease it to you know, private companies, John Holler and Marineland. So this happens, and everyone's really upset. Again, this becomes a civil rights issue, it becomes an issue of free speech and Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Just because you have the ability to buy up that property doesn't mean that, you know, public land should just be given to corporate entities to squash opposition, right? In response to that, something which is like unheard of in Southern Ontario, we did a home demonstration at John Holler's house. And we did this with the folks from the Green Oaks Trailer Park. So 47 families lost their homes. Something to really keep in mind, and that was a focus of that demonstration. Therefore, if this multimillionaire wants to take people's homes away, and they actually want to take the land away where we can actually demonstrate on to oppose this person, we'll just go to your house. You can lease the whole property in front of your business, and we will just demonstrate in front of your house, night and day. So we hold that demonstration, and we hear some more information at that demonstration that stories are coming. So we know something's kind of brewing. We know that the Star's interested. We don't really know how this is going to play out. So we're just waiting at this point. August 15th, which actually happened to be John Holler's birthday, was the day that the Toronto Star stories broke. Who in the room has read any of those investigative stories? Yeah. If anyone else wants to go and read up more of them, thestar.com/Marineland, you can see all of them. There's got to be at least probably 30 stories at this point. August 15th, though, the story breaks. It breaks with photos and video evidence from the park in late 2011 and early 2012, detailing basically a breakdown in their water systems. So for anyone who knows captive parks really in general, but especially dealing with marine mammals, what they're attempting to do is recreate the ocean. This is fundamentally impossible. It is fundamentally impossible to recreate the ocean. And when you have water filtration systems that are complicated and complex, and you have someone who refuses to basically invest in them, i.e. John Holler, you have breakdowns. The situation got so bad that the water was actually green. Animals were actually losing skin. Skin was actually falling off, like in the pools. And a lot of the sea lions actually went blind. One of the sea lions actually had its lens like pop out of its eye because of this. Another really good thing to keep in mind with marine mammals, a lot of them can't leave the water. Dolphins have nowhere else to go. If the water's bad, they have nowhere to go. They are stuck in that pool, right? So this breaks. 8 employees came forward, which was, the only way this was ever going to see the light of day was if they organized themselves in a way like this. And also if they had a supportive base in the community, basically to welcome them with open arms. From the get-go, we made it a point to have a campaign that was focused on the actual players, the people who can actually make decisions in this setting. John Holler is the park owner. Privately owned park, 1,000 acres, he is the decision maker. There's no need for us to go in and yell at workers or get in the face of workers and call them scumbags and low lifes and how could you do this, because if you actually look at the Niagara region, it's a very depressed economy, especially the Niagara Falls area. It's a tourist industry. So what you have is a lot of low-paying, minimum wage jobs, no pension, no job security, seasonal jobs, and you have a huge high unemployment rate, right? Systemic poverty that basically cycles like that. So, a lot of people who were working there are like, yeah, I hate this park. I hate this park, I hate the owner, I hate everything about it, but there's nowhere else for me to work. Fundamentally, another thing, think about class whenever you're trying to build a campaign or you're trying to organize with other people. Because if you can get people to see things in that light and organize in a way where you're organizing not only just against a specific issue, but in a way where you're respecting class divisions and understanding that, it's going to be so much more powerful. So those ex-employees come forward, 8 ex-employees. Marineland has no way of dealing with this. Originally what they do is they put their head veterinarian out in front of the cameras, and the head veterinarian, after a 48-hour cleanup of the facilities where they dump the water again and wash off everything they can, the head vet basically tours the media through the facilities. And it was kind of like, it was a Potomkin village at that point. It was completely a constructed PR move, and within a week of her doing that, she actually refuses to do any more media ever again. She still works at Marineland, still a vet, but refuses to go on camera or say anything in their defense. The College of Veterinarians of Ontario and vets here would have a similar oath. You have a duty to report abuse and neglect, regardless of if that's your client, if that's someone who's paying you. You have a duty to do that. So, in our eyes, she failed that miserably. But around this time, August 15th is breaking, and we're basically at a time where we're way over capacity for our organizing. There's just, when something breaks like that and public outrage and concern is just so intensely focused, if you're an organizer, the hardest thing to possibly do is to channel that into some kind of positive, sustained way where people will stay with that message, a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month. And not only will they stay with it, but they'll actually dedicate themselves to doing something about it, right? Because every single day, that's how the news media works, right? They're going to spin a new story to you that's going to be the big outrage, and everyone's going to follow it. And then a week later, there's going to be something else, and there's going to be something else and else and else. That's how they keep, attention based and how they keep selling their papers. So what we do is we basically rely upon the network that's been built by organizers who have already been involved in other social justice movements and have already have the connections and the contacts, right? For people who have dealt with organizing on this level. So that includes reaching out to friends of mine like Chris and Cesna from Justice for Migrant Workers, right? It includes people organizing with No One Is Illegal. Includes people who are doing Haudenosaunee